In late 2003, two men meet by chance. They become best friends and inseparable, until it becomes apparent that they're both keeping secrets from each other. Michael Bridges, a 22-year-old man from Brandon in Canada, had lost almost everything. He had recently gone through a nasty breakup with his girlfriend, didn't see his friends, lost another job, and was struggling financially. Michael was feeling down and alone most of the time. But now he could forget all of that, for the next few days at least. Michael had won a competition to see a hockey game in Calgary, all expenses paid. It was about 700 miles from home. But as he wasn't paying for any of this, he was going to forget all of his issues and enjoy the game. He was so thrilled that finally something good was happening to him. Michael was trying to grab the attention of a vendor so he could order a beer when another man walked up and sat next to him. The man looked at Michael and with a huge smile said, "Man, I'm so lucky to be here. I won this ticket in a competition." Michael explained that that's what happened to him also. And before long, the two men were chatting like they'd known each other all of their lives. Michael was so excited to have found someone who he could relate to. The two men talked and laughed for hours. After the game had ended, Brock, Michael's new friend, asked if Michael wanted to go to a strip club down the road. Michael excitedly agreed. In the strip club, Michael noticed something about Brock that he found a little strange. On the surface, Brock was very much like Michael, blue collar, regular guy. But he had money, lots of money. He was leaving huge tips for the bartenders, wouldn't let Michael buy a drink, had rolls of bills that he would throw at the dancers. He was flashing the cash. Michael was a little embarrassed as he was not in a great financial situation and could barely afford a night out himself. So a lavish one like this was definitely not something he had planned. But Brock kept on buying the drinks and told Michael not to worry. As they left the club, Michael thanked Brock for such a great night and said he didn't want to go back to his hometown of Brandon as he was having too much fun here, and Brandon has nothing for him anymore. But as he said the word Brandon, Brock's face lit up. Brock interrupted Michael and asked, "Did you say Brandon? I'm relocating there shortly for work." Michael was so excited. He couldn't believe it. His life might just be changing for the better, and he could show his new friend around his hometown. Brock agreed and said, "If you help me find an apartment there, I might be able to help you find work." Michael, remembering about those wads of cash that Brock had been throwing around, said, "Deal." Some months later, in December, the two friends had just had lunch in a bar in Brandon, and Brock was driving Michael back home when his phone rang. From the tone in Brock's voice, Michael could tell that this call was important. He knew that the manner in which Brock was speaking, this was his boss. Both friends had upheld their ends of their bargain. Michael had helped Brock find an apartment, and Brock had helped Michael get work. In fact, the work that Michael was doing was delivering packages for the company that Brock worked for. The job was simple. Brock gives Michael the package, and Michael delivers it to an address somewhere around town. The destination would sometimes change, but the package was always the same size, shape, and weight. Brock made it clear to Michael. There is one rule. Do not look inside the package. Michael remembered the money that Brock had been throwing around in the strip club and the lifestyle he led and thought to himself that this job must be shady. But Michael needed a job right now, so he convinced himself that delivering packages was harmless. Brock was still on the phone to his boss when he said, "Okay, I'll sort it right now." He hung up the phone, spun the car around, and headed back in the direction they had been coming from. After a short drive, they arrived at a cheap-looking, run-down motel. Brock ordered Michael to sit tight and don't move. He then marched over to a door at the motel and began to bang on it. After a few seconds, a woman answered the door, and was shocked to see Brock. From what Michael could see, they clearly knew each other. Brock was yelling at the woman and she was yelling back. Then Brock pushed her into the motel room and began to hit her. Knocking the woman to the floor, he continued to punch her in the face. Michael could only get glimpses of this, but he saw enough to understand what Brock was doing. After a minute or two, Brock walked out of the room and back to the car, watched by a battered and blooded woman standing at her door. The two drove back to Michael's house, and neither of them spoke. Once they arrived, Brock said, "Don't say a word to anyone about this." Michael just nodded his head and agreed to keep quiet. A week went by, and Michael hadn't heard from Brock, until Brock told Michael that he had another delivery for him, if he's still up for it. Michael wanted to say no, and by this point, was wishing he'd never met Brock at all. But he still needed the money, and was also afraid of what he'd already got himself into, and what might happen if he says no. So, after a few seconds of silence, Michael said he is still committed to the job and will do the delivery. Brock went on to say that both he and the boss are both very impressed with Michael's silence. Michael picked up his car keys and set off out to grab the package for delivery. February 2004, Brock and Michael were sitting in a diner in Brandon having a coffee. Things were back to normal with Michael delivering packages on a regular basis. And when Michael wasn't delivering packages for Brock, they would often meet for coffees or lunch, and Brock would always pay. But today, Brock appeared tense, like he had something on his mind. Not really looking at Michael and kept tapping the table with his car keys, he didn't appear comfortable at all. Finally, Michael asked if he was okay, to which Brock smiled and said, "Yeah, things are great. Better than great, in fact. I have an offer for you, one that could potentially change your life. Both me and the boss are very impressed with you." Brock knew that Michael was prompt and reliable with his deliveries, and that he had not looked inside the packages. He added, "The boss would like to meet you." Michael knew that if he could impress the boss, and if the boss liked him, he might get a promotion in the organization. And a promotion would mean more money, possibly even the kind of money Brock was earning. But he also didn't know anything about his boss, or the organization he was working for that matter. Michael was both excited and nervous. Before Michael could say yes or no, Brock said, "You have to prove you're worthy. Prove you're capable of more than keeping secrets and delivering packages." Michael would have to prove he could be as ruthless and as brutal as the people he was working for. And with that, he sat and thought for a minute. And then it came to him. He could tell Brock his secret, something that had happened in his life some time ago, something that was truly devastating and horrific. Brock sat there, eyes wide open, jaw dropped, and listened to Michael's story. When Michael finished, Brock nodded his head and said, "You're ready to meet the boss." A few days later, Michael walked into a hotel in a nearby town and saw Brock waiting in the lobby. Brock stood up and waved Michael to come over, and the two men made their way to one of the rooms to meet the boss. Understandably, Michael was very nervous. The two men arrived at the room. Brock unlocked the door and they walked in. It was immediately evident that the room was empty. Michael asked Brock where the boss was. Brock explained that the boss doesn't wait for anybody. People wait for the boss. He then told Michael to sit down and try to stay calm. Michael was clearly very nervous by this point and visibly shaking as the two friends sat in silence. He knew that if he impressed the boss, he could make more money than he ever imagined. But if he failed, well, who knows what might happen next. Brock could see Michael was on edge and suggested to him that he talks Brock through his story one more time. like a practice run before the boss gets here. Perhaps it will take his mind off being so nervous. Michael agreed. Anything was better than total silence. So he began to tell his story one more time. And again, Brock sat and listened. As Michael finished his story, there was a knock at the door. "You ready? You ready to meet him?" Michael nodded but could hardly speak. As Brock opened the door, Michael leaned forward so that he could see who was at the other side. And when he did, he immediately knew who this organization was. Michael's entire life for the past several months had been a huge lie. The hockey game competition he'd won in Calgary was made up. This organization had arranged this so that he could have his so-called chance encounter with Brock. The packages he was delivering? Nothing sinister. Just baking flour. The woman he watched getting beaten up by Brock? Acting. The blood was fake. The kind of stuff you can buy from the joke store. The stuff they use in movies. The only true part about the entire story was that Brock was genuinely working for a secret organization, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. And Brock was an undercover officer. He was playing his part in a sting to get Michael to confess to a murder, which he did while hidden cameras recorded him in the hotel room. 2 years earlier, Michael's girlfriend, Erin Chorney, tried to break up with him. He lost it. He strangled her and dumped her body. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison without the chance of parole.